Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. We're back at the NYIT Auditorium on Broadway for my Screen Actors Guild Foundation BroadwayWorld Conversations Q&A series, celebrating the vibrant theater community here in New York City and the union actors who aspire to have a career on both stage and screen. My guest today is one of his generation's most sought-after actors, starring in everything from Spring Awakening to Hair to Glee. And now he is co-starring as King George in Lin-Manuel Miranda's hit musical Hamilton at the Public. Please welcome Jonathan Groff. So welcome back to the New York Theater.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back.
How much fun are you having playing King George in Hamilton?
It's so fun. I'm on stage for 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's the most fun 8 minutes I've ever had. It's a blast. And the show is, I replaced Brian Darcy James in the show, who's incredible. And so I got to see it a bunch of times before I went into it, and I just like wept through the show every single time. Even in like the stage management booth at the back of the theater, I was like, I'm just gonna watch it for technical, and then I'm like crying watching it. It's such an amazing show, and it's such an amazing group of people. It's great.
How did you get cast? Who came to you?
Good question. How did I get cast? Lynn and Tommy Kail, who directed it, just like shot me an email, and they were like, "Hey, Brian has to leave. Would you want to come in and like replace him for the last couple months in the show?" It was before it had opened,
yeah.
And I hadn't heard any of the music, and I didn't know anything about the show, and I just was like, "Sure, yeah." But based on like loving them and knowing their work, and I just said yes, and then I was in it.
What's it like inhabiting him? It's such a fun role.
It is such a fun role. It's kind of like I don't want to spoil anything for the people that haven't seen it, but you can kind of like get away with anything in that role because it's so... I had like 2 days of rehearsal before I went into it. It was really fast, but King George doesn't really interact with anyone on stage except for the audience. And so I love that. I've started to do like cabarets here and there, and I love that sort of like direct contact and relationship with the audience. And because of the character of King George and because of that sort of dynamic, it definitely feels like anything could happen every night, which is great.
No, so I was going to ask you how much rehearsal you had with Tommy Kail. 2 days?
2 days, yeah. It was so fast. But, it's 8 minutes, so.
Yeah. 2 days works.
Yeah, exactly.
What has it been like working with Lin-Manuel Miranda and singing his score?
He's just like he's like the messiah of musical theater, first of all. Yeah. The show is so groundbreaking, and just like I hear it, I watch it. Like probably about half the shows a week I watch from the like VOM of the theater where you can see what's happening on stage. I actually just watch the show when I'm not on stage because just watching it every night, you get something different from, it's just so beautifully written and it's so complex, and he's such a genius. And then on the flip side, he acts like an elementary school teacher. He's just like the sweetest, heart in the right place guy. He's so generous. I feel like it's so rare that combo happens, where it's like somebody is so epically talented and not like insane.
we totally get it.
I mean, he's insane, but in like all of the best possible ways.
In a fun way.
Yeah.
Working with this cast and the importance of this piece.
Yeah, I mean, the cast... Chris Jackson does what he did in The Heights, which is he does a prayer circle every day at 5 minutes before the show, where pretty much the whole company stands in a circle and holds hands and talks about how he sort of says something different every night, whether it's like, we're so lucky to be here, and blessing the people that are coming into the audience, and may they have a transformative experience. And I mean, it's just everybody's like heart is in the right place. And it's exciting too, because it's a lot of will-be Broadway debuts. And so it's exciting to sort of be around that energy and have these like young people. I mean, yeah, I'm like 30, so I'm like kind of young, but not, I'm like in the middle now. But have these like young people just like not even know how gifted they are. Like Pippa Sue, who plays Eliza. Yeah. She's so amazing. And she just is like so effortless. She's like 24 years old and just breaking hearts nightly on the stage. And I just like, so that, and Anthony Ramos who's in the show, and Oak, and just the whole cast. It's a lot of like young talent, and I'm just so excited for them.
And the importance of this piece. I mean, everyone is trying to get a ticket. We have a lot of fans in the house that have tickets for Broadway because they can't get into the lottery, and they wanted to know, will you maybe be doing this on Broadway?
I don't know. It's TBD. It's TBD.
Okay.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if it works out.
Just talk about the importance. I mean, what this means to you and what it means, the type of show that Lynn wrote.
I mean, I feel like the show itself does the impossible thing of a musical, which it checks all the boxes. It's incredibly sort of artistically ambitious, and yet it's completely commercial. Yeah. It's for example, I feel like the best way to describe it is to say that like in 1 week, Bill Clinton, Busta Rhymes, and Bernadette Peters came to see the show, and that just shows the reach of this show. And they all came backstage and loved and like expressed their like admiration and love for the show and their appreciation for what Lynn wrote. So I think that he's touching on like some sort of cultural nerve there. The fact that it's a totally non-white cast, pretty much, with the exception of King George and a couple of the ensemble members playing. You don't think for a second, like when you're watching the show, like, oh God, okay, George Washington is black, so now I have to like understand that George Washington is black. You don't even think about it for a second. Yeah. Chris Jackson hits the stage as George Washington, and you're like, okay, great. You completely buy it. And Cherry Jones actually came to see the show last weekend, and we were talking about that. And she was like, that's a testament to how brilliantly the show is written, because Shakespeare is done all the time with non-white casting, and you don't think about it. And this is the same thing with Hamilton. It's like such a wonderful, well-written, amazing piece of theater that they add this sort of element to it, and it's sort of being socially progressive without sort of throwing it in your face, because they don't comment on it.
And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. And yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. We gonna rise up, time to take a shot. We gonna rise up, time to take a shot. We gonna rise up, rise up. It's time to take a shot. Rise up, rise up. It's time to take a shot. Rise up. It's time to take a shot. Rise up. Take a shot, shot, shot. Hey, yo, it's time to take a shot. Time to take a shot. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I am Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton, just you wait. I am not throwing away my shot.
I want to go back to the beginning. Where did your love for performing begin, and what were your very early creative outlets?
I was Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz in my dad's barn. He trains and races horses for a living. So that was my first role. I was 4, and my brother was the Tin Man, and he also directed the show. So that was the first one. And then I went to a public high school and I did like public high school theater. But the theater that kind of like changed the direction of my life was this theater in Pennsylvania called the Fulton Opera House, which is like it's a partial equity theater, and they hire equity and non-equity actors from New York to come and do the shows there. And it's 15 minutes from my house where I grew up. And Michael Mitchell was the artistic director of the theater. He died of cancer, sadly, a couple years ago. But he took me under his wing, and I was in the ensemble of every show that I could be in the ensemble of. And when I couldn't be in the ensemble, I worked like the stage crew. And I learned so much from watching the actors, like the professional actors perform. And I was constantly sort of asking them questions, and I subscribed to Backstage Magazine because they told me about Backstage Magazine at that theater. And my first roommate in New York was a girl that I met at that theater. And so that sort of institution in Lancaster, PA, really like, I don't know what I would be doing if it, like, that sort of set my life in a totally different direction. I really wanted to go to college when I was in high school to major in theater. But then my senior year of high school, I auditioned for a non-union tour of The Sound of Music and ended up getting that. And I made like $10,000 for the year of touring on the show. We got paid like $300 a week. And I was like, I'll never be able to pay off my $40,000 a year loans to Carnegie Mellon where I had deferred from. So I was like, let me just take this chunk of cash and get a job waiting tables and move to New York and see if I even really want to do this.
And that got you to New York.
Yeah.
Okay, so you made your Broadway debut as a swing and dance captain in the Joseph Brooks musical, In My Life.
Yeah, it was at the Music Box Theater. I couldn't believe Rachel Hoffman, who is a casting director, she works at Telsey. She cast me in the Sound of Music tour when I was 18 from an open call.
Yeah.
She like saw me at an open call and cast me in that. So then cut to like 2 years later, I'm in New York and she's casting In My Life. And she remembers me, obviously, from the Sound of Music tour and sort of always believed in me. And I was 19, and they were looking for understudies, and she brought me in. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. The show was so bizarre and insane and fun, and the experience was so unique because it was... as being an understudy and a swing, I was sort of like how I was at the Fulton Opera House, sort of in the wings watching the experience, learning from observing, because I because I was the understudy. So I was sitting outside of the experience a little bit. And what was shocking was how mean-spirited and brutal, even like, forget critics, but like even people in the audience, like they would paper the house with kids from universities who would like openly laugh at the show while it was happening on the stage. I was sitting in the mezzanine being like, oh my God, people were like laughing at the show and sort of came to sort of hate watch it. And it was like nuts. It was really intense to sort of watch that. And what was amazing was to sort of watch the company of the show kind of build a little bubble around themselves and just do their work, put their heads down and do their work and try to push out the sort of negative stuff that was happening all around them, like the negative press and the negative sort of energy. But then that really, like, the flip side of that helped me a lot in Spring Awakening, which was the opposite, where it was like everyone was just like showering the show with praise, but we still had to like create a little bubble around ourselves and put our heads down and do our work. It was such a good lesson learning sort of both sides of having to do that, whether it's incredibly positive feedback or incredibly negative feedback.
Yeah. Well, you started to talk about the role that changed everything for you, which was Melchior in the musical Spring Awakening, first off Broadway at the Atlantic. And none of you knew then at the Atlantic, because I interviewed you, like, the whole cast that day, and everybody was like, we have no idea really what we're in at that point.
Yeah, at all.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what I was in until I left the show and actually got to see it. I didn't really. I mean, I knew like what... Yeah. It was really excuse me, seltzer water. It was really educational to see the show after I was in it and to just be like, oh my God, it's like a beautiful piece of art. We were just like doing our job, doing our jobs. It was maybe good that we didn't see it before we were in it. But yeah, it was also a mysterious piece. I think even like along the way, they had a hard time getting it produced. It went for years. It was in development because you say like classical text, rock music, sex with teenagers, and producers aren't like, oh, great, let's do that.
Here's a check.
Yeah, here's a check with like super poetic lyrics that like might not make sense to you upon first reading or 100th reading or whatever. It's like it's a very complex poetic piece of theater. It's not on the page a commercial hit.
So looking back, what did that show and that role mean to you?
Oh God, everything. Yeah. on a sort of superficial level, it was every like dream I had come true. Moving to New York, I wanted to be in a Broadway show. I wanted to work with Michael Mayer because I'd seen Thoroughly Modern Millie 6 times, and so that in sort of like a superficial way, it like checked the boxes. But more than that, and more importantly than that, I think ultimately it was the acting training that I never had. There's nothing more valuable, and I feel this in Hamilton. I'm reminded every night there's nothing more valuable as an actor or a better way to learn than getting the opportunity to perform in front of a live audience every night. No matter where you are, whether it's on Broadway or in Florida or like doing a tour or whatever, that gift of having a crowd of people and a great show and a great part is just like, we all left transformed as actors. We started as like kids. I felt like I was getting fired every day, truly, in the workshop. And 5 kids did get fired between the workshop and the off-Broadway run. We were just like nervous to keep our jobs. And then we went from kids to collaborators. Then we started investing in the piece and having a point of view, and we grew up. We became adults, we became artists. We sort of refined our voices in a way that we didn't know how to in the beginning, and it was just like the most incredible training experience anyone could ever ask for. It was, and then the group of people, it was just everything.
Yeah.
Just too unreal, all this. Watching his world slip through my fist.
Playing with her in your fantasies. Haven't you heard a word how I want you?
Now, your final auditions you actually did with Leah Michele, right?
Yes.
Tell me that story about going in, meeting her for the first time, and auditioning with her.
Well, I was the wild card. I learned this when I left the show, thank God. But Tom and Michael told me the story where I auditioned for Carrie Gardner, who works at Jim Carnahan Casting, as a pre-screen. Then they called me back in to meet with Michael and Tom Hulse and Kim Grigsby, the music director. And it was just me doing like a couple of scenes and singing a song. And I sang I'd never heard Left Behind, but they played it for me, and they asked me if I had. Michael was like, "Can you sing in falsetto?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so I sang in falsetto, and he was like, "That's your falsetto?" And I laughed at him. I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And then I left. And Tom told me that they were not going to call me. That was it. Like, I was done. I was not coming to the callbacks. They didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't think that I was good to play the part. But Tom said that he was so impressed that I laughed at Michael in that audition that he was like, well, let's just put him in the mix because ultimately we're going to need a kid because he's carrying the show. We need like a kid that has like, can let things roll off his back. So let's just throw him in as a wild card in the final mix. So I was like literally the one that like, nah, let's just throw him in. There was 7 other guys up for Melchior and me. And so that day was a Saturday in December of 2005. And I walked in, and I was the first person there because they were this was like 3 weeks after that time with Michael, because they were gonna like maybe just let me go. They were gonna let me sing one more time and then let me go before all the rest of the kids showed up. So I came in and I sang, and then they were like, all right, let's keep him around. And I left, and Leah was there. And she was wearing like, I remember what she was wearing. It was like she looked like Eponine. She was wearing like a beret sort of hat off to the side, and like sort of like a blousey, like tan colored shirt, and like a long sort of flowing like dress with like boots. Yeah. Eponine. And she immediately walked over to me, and she was like, hi, my name's Leah. I've played Wendla in the past like 18 workshops of this show. You must be auditioning for Melchior. And I was like, yes, yeah. And she was sort of going around to all the Melchiors and introducing herself because she was like, who is it going to be with me? And then I met Gallagher was there, and Gideon was there, and Johnny B. Wright was there. I mean, everybody was there. Well, not everybody, because this was an audition for a workshop where then 5 people got fired. But those guys were still there. And so then it was like the Sound of Music. They lined us up in a line and was like, that Melchior come out, that Melchior step in, that Wendla come out, that Wendla step in. And they looked at it. I mean, it was like true. It was like torture. And it was 8 hours. It was all day long. And then they would pair us up, and then they would have the boys do the reformatory scene together and the guys with the Wendla. And then I did the beating scene with Leah, and I remember her, this was her being more like Rachel Berry and less like Wendla, but she was like, she was like, so we're gonna do the beating scene together. I was like, okay, yeah. And she was like, I'm gonna use the pencil as the stick. And you can pretend that it's the stick, but don't hit me with it. And I was like, okay. She had it like all planned out how we were going to do it. And we kept sort of like giggling together and reading together. And then then we were in sort of like the final, there was me and Leah and Gallagher, and then there was 3 other people. And they kept sort of going back and forth. And then they let us all go. And then like a week or maybe like 4 days later, I got the call that I got it, and I freaked out. And I didn't even know, like, Broadway I didn't even know that was an option at all. I was just so excited to get this part. I remember telling my dad on the phone, I know I can't do it in the I like knew that it was something that I was far away from me, but I said, I know that it's in me to do it. I know that it's like in me, and I know that I can't do it right now, but I know that I'll be able to do it eventually if they just like give me a chance to do it. And then they did.
Okay, taking on the role of Claude, first in the 40th anniversary concert of Hair,
Oh, nice.
and then for the run the following summer at the Delacorte Theater in the Park. Was that magical for you?
Oh, it was so magical.
Yeah.
It was everything. Yeah, it was like being buttoned up in Spring Awakening for 2 years in like knee socks and sort of repressed Germany, and then getting to like explode in the park and be a hippie was like it was amazing. It was so fun, and it was such a great group of people, and this being in that space, there was something like the gods, something aligned with that production and that moment of time. It was a very unique experience. That group was so awesome. I also had that play happened at a really interesting time in my life because up until that point I was closeted. Even like with my friends, like I had not come out of the closet at all. And so as soon as I left Spring Awakening, I like had a revelation and came out of the closet to like my friends and my family, but I hadn't told the cast of Hair because I was still like they were new people in my life, and I was still sort of like slowly working through it and telling my close friends and sort of letting it happen. And they were so unquestionably loving to me they didn't even know what was going on. They didn't know like sort of the personal like drama that I was going through. They were just like such a loving, embracing group of people, as was that spirit of that show. And so being surrounded by them at that time and being able to sing that music and play that part at that time, it was just very it felt very personal and really like a big musical theater hug.
Yeah. In 2010, you went to London to co-star opposite Simon Russell Beale and Estelle Parsons in the Ira Levin thriller Death Trap, one of my favorite mysteries of all time, favorite shows. How did this show happen for you, and what was it like working with Simon and Estelle?
Estelle is another one of those that I was like, she lived above me. She lived in the flat above me. And I was like, Estelle, Friday night, it's wine night. I'm coming upstairs. Let's hang out. And she would be like, all right. And then we would hang out. I forced her to hang out with me. And I was like, Estelle, when are we going to watch Bonnie and Clyde together? And she was like, not happening. And I was like, Estelle, come on. And you better believe I got her to watch Bonnie and Clyde with me. And she gave me a running she was like, I don't want to watch this. I don't know why we're doing this. And then it was going, and she was like, so let me tell you about this part.
Well, you are known to legions of fans for playing bad boy Jesse St. James on the hit TV show Glee. Glee fans? How did you originally get cast in Glee?
Ryan Murphy said, like, he told me that I had worked with him before. We'd done a pilot that didn't get picked up, and he was working with Leah, and he was like, I want to get you on the show. And so he wrote me the role of Jesse St. James as like a villain, because he was like, I want you to be, you're so like the good boy. Yeah. I want you to play like a villain on the show. I think that would be fun. And so he wrote me that role, which was so awesome. It was a cool experience because it was sort of like an experience where I was more of an observer. I certainly like got to perform and had a blast, and that was great. But the show had already aired, and it was this epic thing, and all the kids were like in the thick of it. And I was sort of like coming in as like a guest star and sort of seeing it from the outside. And it was amazing to sort of watch that whole journey happen over the last 7 years. And those kids, like Chris Colfer was like in high school. Yeah. It's just amazing to me. And now he's a superstar. And that show like changed his life and changed all of their lives. It's just amazing. Just
your fondest memories of working on that show. It was fast when you were on the set, like recording musical numbers and learning them and shooting them, was it?
Super fast.
Yeah. Like how long?
It felt like summer camp because it was like you're in the recording studio, now you're in the sort of like ghetto like thing with a mirror where you did the dances. Now you're all dressed up and shooting it for like an audience, and that, it was like a lot of. It was it was very joyful. It was busy, but it was very like summer camp joyful for me. Cause I, again, like came in, was like, what's up? I sang Bohemian Rhapsody and then like got out of there. But like for the kids that were there all the time, it was a grind because they were doing, 16-hour days, Monday through Friday. Inevitably they would work on Saturdays. And then for the first 2 years, they put them on the road, on the tour. Yeah. Which was like insane. They had like 2 weeks off. Then they're shooting another 23 episodes back in the thick of it. So fortunately they were like young and excited, so they were fine, but they really like drove them into the ground in a major way.
Yeah. Well, let's get into looking. I loved this TV show on HBO. I thought the writing, the directing, the cast, everything about this show, which is wonderful. You just finished the second season. I know that HBO, sadly, didn't pick it up for a third season, but right? Who said boo?
Thank
Fabulous. You. But I just read that now they're going to make a movie to sort of sum everything up. Was that announced?
Yeah.
Tell us.
That's like the plan. The plan is that they're calling it a special.
Okay.
So I don't know what it's like on a very special looking. I don't know what that means. But I think it'll feel like a movie. Yeah. And I'm super grateful that we get to go back and because that rarely ever happens, where something gets canceled and then you get to go back and actually say goodbye. And the experience has been so life altering, and the people in the experience are like, I went to lunch with Murray, who plays Dom, 2 days after we were canceled, and we both just like burst into tears. We were like, it's a very personal, it's like it's the most personal thing I've ever worked on, and everybody, it feels really connected to the work that we did. And in love with San Francisco, and so the fact that we get to like go and have a proper like, okay, goodbye. Knowing Andrew and Michael, I doubt that it'll be wrapped up in a bow, the storylines. Like I doubt that they'll just like end the thing. You know, I'm sure that they do things in such an ambiguous way that I can't imagine that it's like a wrap up special. But but also knowing them, I imagine they'll do something really interesting and hopefully satisfying for everybody involved. And so I'm grateful that I'm super bummed that we don't get to do a season to say goodbye to the show, but I'm grateful that we're at least getting, a special.
Yeah. Patrick is such a beautifully written character, warts and all. I mean, all the characters in this thing are so beautifully written. How did this come about for you, and what did you love about playing him?
I went to the audition, and I did the scene in the pilot where I meet Richie on the train, and where I go on a bad date, and I didn't. They were like, you might be asked to improv a little, whatever. So I learned the lines, but I didn't obsessively learn the lines. And so I was sort of just letting whatever was going to happen in the room happen. And I started doing the scene, and I started sweating, and I got really red, and then felt like, ooh, this is really close to the bone. I didn't realize when I was sort of reading it and half preparing it that it was going to feel so close to the bone. And that was sort of the from beginning to end, my experience of playing the part is that, for better or for worse, I really relate to this character, and they encouraged all of us to really sort of bring ourselves to the table, and it was really exposing in a good way.
Just drop everything whenever you're free. It's Dom's first gay rugby game.
That's right.
And what if you change your plans at the last minute, like when I was sitting in the Castro watching The Exorcist all by myself?
I'm definitely all yours.
And you know how much I hate the devil children.
Fine, then don't cancel your plans, but take me with you.
Right. Wait, really?
Yeah.
Well, you were known to millions of fans as the voice of Kristoff in
Frozen.
Disney's, in that worldwide phenomenon Frozen, which has become the highest grossing animated film of all time.
What?
Right?
I know, it's crazy.
I mean, we were all there at the beginning too, covering this. When did you realize that this was going to become a big hit? I mean, after it opened,
I remember reading the script and thinking and hearing the music and thinking, I haven't heard anything like this since Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, the movies I grew up watching. And I loved that the end was the love between the two sisters. I was like, oh my God, and it feels progressive. That's so cool. I hope that this works out. I didn't I think everyone, even Disney, they can't rewrote it so many times, and I don't think anyone had any idea.
did he change at all during the process?
He did a lot.
Yeah.
He did a lot, yeah. At one point, he was a hoarder, and so all of his things were in his sleigh because he was a hoarder.
I love it.
There was a bunch of different. He was super gruff in the beginning, and then he sort of mellowed out and became sweeter as time went on. At one point, they were going to have him have a beard, but then this is before I was involved. But then Disney was like, no, little girls think of men with beards as their dads, so we can't have him be a love interest and have a beard.
What is the best bit of advice that you've been given, both personally and professionally, that you live by?
I think the professional advice came from, we were doing Spring Awakening off Broadway, and Michael Mitchell, again, bringing him back up again, the guy that died of cancer, who is my mentor, had a friend named Rhonda. This is so random. They had just been to see Vicki Clark in Light in the Piazza, and she had above her dressing room door, "Don't let them steal your joy." And they came to see me in Spring Awakening, and we were talking, and it was before the show had opened. It was before it was reviewed, and Rhonda actually was the one that brought it up, where she was like, I really feel like these are words to live by, because your show is about to come out and it's about to be reviewed, and who knows what they'll say, but you should know that this is a very special show, and it's important to remember that. And I found that that piece of advice, don't let them steal your joy, is so it's an everyday choice, because auditioning and bad reviews are just look. There's so many things that can get in the way of losing that like ninth grade joy and excitement of going to the theater, and it's part of what that we all try to remind ourselves at Hamilton when Chris Jackson gets everybody holding hands in a circle, is that thing of like, we're doing what we've always dreamt of doing, and let's not take it for granted one day. And even though sometimes the odds are against you, and it's the easier choice is to release that joy and sort of get upset or get into a bad place about this. Let's like constantly try and restoke that fire of that teenage excitement of acting.
Thank you for that. Talk about full circle. Looking at you now, and I go back to when I was sitting in that rehearsal room looking at you in my life. You and I have known each other for many, many years. Yeah. I'm thrilled everything that has happened for you personally and professionally, and this has been the best afternoon.
Thanks, Richie Ridge. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.